Well, hello again. Here's another subject for the yes or no treatment. Here's a good current one. Is Harry a victim? Well, I guess we should start by deciding what we mean by victim. What does the word mean? Well, there's no better way, in my view, to really examine the meaning of a word in depth than to consult the Oxford English Dictionary, of which I have a copy. It's 20,000 pages. And in the Oxford English Dictionary, they tell you what the word means, what the etymology is, where the word came from in the first place, and even give you some marvelous literary examples of its use. For instance, with victim, they quote a Dickens novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, and a reference to victimhood. So we get a pretty good, thorough view of the word and how to deal with it. And it, of course, offers several levels of definition, including people who suffer death and violence and torture and so forth. But the one that really seems to fit here is this. A victim is someone who suffers hardship, injury or loss, and is badly treated or taken advantage of. That's pretty good. I think I'll go with that one. Much of our interest in this subject really is taking a look at Harry, particularly in the context of Harry and Meghan, and in particular after the recent Oprah interview. Some would say that Harry is simply overwhelmed by this dominant American woman and is a toady and can't do anything for himself. Others would say that Harry and Meghan can do no wrong and his situation is nothing of that sort. I think also, as we think about this issue of victimhood, we have to realize that it probably, particularly in this case, has different levels to it. I mean, first of all, there is simply the notion of the facts of being a victim. What examples are there of these injuries or hardship that one can point to in order to demonstrate that he is or is not a victim? Then there's the kind of way in which it sort of absorbs into one's life, because one has experienced a lot of these sorts of unpleasant circumstances. One kind of becomes that and lives that way, and finally it morphs into kind of a professional victimhood. One where you really kind of live for being a victim. So is Harry one of those? What are we dealing with here? Okay, well, let's take a look at the arguments. Let's first of all look at the arguments that yes, indeed, he is a victim. Well, one way to deal with that is simply to look at the events of his life and how that may have formed him into the kind of stunted personality that the definition suggests, and that my different layers kind of illuminate. Harry, of course, to begin with, was born as a member of the royal family, and right away, what happened? He was sent away to boarding school. Oh dear. And boarding school is an environment where your life is really not your own. You're the victim of bullies, overweening discipline, and once again, if you read Dickens, some pretty dreadful oppression as well, even some level of physical violence. So there's a victimhood that gets you started, right away. Then there is this whole question of, as he got older and became a member of the royal family, a working member of the royal family, he started to realize what the restrictions were, what the rules were. how you really couldn't say what you wanted to say. You didn't really have any kind of privacy, certainly in public. You can't go out for a cup of coffee when you feel like it. Well, you can't vote. Harry commented on that recently. He's never voted. I suppose that makes sense, that's a rule. You can't vote because you have to be apolitical. You have to be a Protestant. Meghan was actually both baptized and confirmed in the Church of England when she came over before she married Harry. So there's a lot of restrictions, and there are rules. You don't talk about how you feel about anything, of course. Then, of course, Harry started gradually to realize that he is the spare. He is not only not the heir apparent, but he's only exists in case anything happens to the heir apparent. So, in a way, he's a victim of birth order. Then, of course, came the army. Well, that was a happy arrangement for a while, but of course, the army is not the kind of organization where you really are encouraged to be a liberal, independent thinker. You do what you're told. And that went okay for him until, by virtue of an unfortunate slip by a journalist, it was discovered by the world what combat unit he was fighting in. Became perhaps a target for the Taliban, had to be removed from it, and so he was a victim, I guess, not only of the press, which of course he and Meghan have subsequently railed at, but even his own celebrity, his own royal personage, which itself made him the potential victim of kidnapping. Gosh, it goes on and on. Then, after that, there's this whole doubt he may feel about his provenance, his birth. Is he even really a member of the family? Is it possible that his mother had an affair with someone, the culmination of which was Harry, and as such, is he therefore a victim of his mother's uncertainty and desperate search for love, which in itself is a victim of the circumstances she found herself in within the royal family and with her husband Prince Charles. So there's a lot of that going on. Next is his kind of sad relationship with his father. He complained in the interview that his father had cut him off financially. To be honest, I'm not quite surprised his father did cut him off financially, but that's really another point. He felt that he was the victim of some kind of unfair treatment or whatever, and also the fact that his father wouldn't return his calls. So what we're really dealing with here, I suppose, is that he's the victim of a kind of an endemic lack of love and affection in that family anyway, of which Charles is a premier example. He's a guy who doesn't know how to deal with emotions, and his relationship with Harry is no exception to that. So that really is a kind of a legitimate artifact of victimhood. And then finally he meets Meghan Markle. They're married, and he quickly becomes dominated, really. He is not exactly a self-actualized person under the influence of Meghan Markle. As he once said, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. Oh dear. Well, there's a chap who's almost been ground down at the heel by a variety of circumstances and systemic influences and people, and golly, that's his situation. Wow, is he ever a victim? Well, let's look at the other side of this. There, of course, are those who say, no, he is not a victim. He is Prince Harry, he's a strong and capable individual in his own right. No victimhood for him. Well, to begin with, what was Harry as he became a young man? He was a popular prince, certainly had a lot of friends, tremendous amount of attention from women. He really had a lot going for him, and reveled in that and handled it very well. His experience in the army, of course, was a disappointment when he had to be removed from the field of battle, but nonetheless it was very actualizing for him. It gave him an opportunity to get to know people from a social caste that he ordinarily never would have met in his life. And that had to have been a liberating experience for him, not a victimhood situation at all. And then, of course, finally, he met Meghan. Now, some would say that he had a tough time in his kind of subordination to her, but not a bit of it. In Meghan's case, she was infused with this, I guess some would say, American view of self-actualization, how it's what the individual does for him or herself that's important, that you are what you make of yourself. And this is something that Harry took to like a duck takes to water. It became self-actualizing. It became a welcome and liberating influence, and as a consequence of all of that, made Harry a happy man. He has found his element, and he's in a place that he wants to be. Not a bit of a victim, but rather a happy, fulfilled individual. Well, those are the arguments. Not bad. I guess one can see that either one of them, either side has made some good points, but I don't think the case for victimhood is certainly an open and shut case. There are two sides to every question. So what is my take on this? Well, my take is that Harry is stuck. He is a victim, really, not of his own inadequacies, but of an entire system. He gradually came to the conclusion that he was restricted, victimized, held back, pushed down. He was an unhappy chap, and the whole system really was a repressive one, and one that kept him from actualizing himself as an individual. And then came Meghan, and together they themselves became victims of a situation in that they together realized that they couldn't really fulfill themselves and manage as members of the royal entourage. I think at the start they probably thought they could, but it just didn't work for them. So in effect they were both victims of the system, but that put Harry in just a dreadful position, in that he realized he couldn't operate successfully there as a member of that, especially with Meghan as his wife. And now he's in California. One wonders whether he can even adapt to the California lifestyle. I mean, what will he be? Will he be a sort of kind of celebrity freak from abroad? What will be his self kind of perception? I don't know. I think it's really a pretty awful case. I think he's stuck. Poor chap, I feel sorry for him. Well, there it is. Gosh, it was kind of exhausting to think about this whole thing, because it's quite an unpleasant and unsatisfying state of affairs here. One gets the feeling that it's not resolved, but nobody's really happy about this. Oh dear, sorry to say that. Okay, well, hope you liked it. Usual stuff. Give me a like, subscribe, notification, comment, etc., etc., and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.